Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 14th episode of the Curious Mind podcast. In this episode, I discuss with a friend and client who has been learning and practicing Stoicism. We explore some of the key points that he brings up and questions around how much these lessons from Stoicism can be applied to the day-to-day life. We further debate which of the lessons from Stoicism are more philosophical in nature, which are more practical, and how it all relates to the psychology of self-development. Enjoy the discussion, and feel free to let me know your comments and suggestions on my Facebook page, Illich Psychotherapy and Self-Development.
So what I wanted to discuss, so today I wanted to focus on Stoicism. From the point of view of this book that I read in particular by William Irvine, and basically this book is called A Guide to the Good Life, right? Okay. So I stumbled upon it. I wanted to read it for a long time. I don't know why I wasn't into it, because I was like, philosophy, I don't know. I want to get into that. Right? It's like philosophy. No one wants to intentionally say, today I want to wake up and read philosophy. Maybe you guys do because you're philosophers.
Yes.
But so I decided I'll do it. So when I picked it up, it was really interesting. And what I want to discuss with you are some of the points that he has brought up in the book. And I wanted to get your view into it. I believe, and I don't want to speak on his behalf, but I believe he used to practice Buddhism before, and he only started getting into Stoicism somewhere around his 50s. So then he does a lot of comparison of Buddhist philosophies versus Stoic philosophy.
Okay,
right?
Just let me frame it a little bit. It makes it complex, but also a little bit simpler. The simple version is we basically discuss between me and my background and you and your understanding and your background. Historically, there were Stoic philosophers. Then their teachings were written down either by them in the best cases or by the students, which is already an interpretation. And then we have a tradition of interpreting Stoic philosophies by philosophers, one of whom is the author of this book. So there are, if we wanted to, and we don't have a scholarly discussion right now, but believe me when I say that there are scholars who try to, disentangle all those different layers and try to assess with which probability certain statements can be indeed traced back to the historical Stoics, which is not what we do today. So this is the simple task, which is that basically we discuss with your understanding what you got out of the book and your other readings and my background from Buddhism and philosophy.
Right.
So we can intend to
also,
for the author or for any Stoic philosophers.
Yeah, and I'm not a philosopher. I'm just your student, or if I can even call that, right? Or I've been working with you for a while, so
yes. But you're also interested in these kinds of wisdom literature, philosophies. Not that you do it professionally, but you're interested in that, and you're not a beginner in that respect.
Yes, a couple of years under my belt, but I think I have to go along. All right, so on Stoicism again. So the book is by William Irvine, Guide to the Good Life, and so what he has taken the entire thing around Stoicism, right? And what he started with, which attracted me to this book, was his first statement, right? Which is, if I were to die tomorrow, or if I was on my deathbed, would I be worried that I lived a life of worth or not, right? So was my life worth it? Or did I do things in my life which I'm happy about and satisfied with at the time of death? Now, you started me on this with the meditations by Aya Kima. I don't know if you remember.
Yes.
Where she talks about death and contemplation of death, and you're at the time of in your deathbed and you're thinking it. So when I was doing those meditations, then my issue was, yes, I do feel that at the time of my death, I would be worried whether I lived a purposeful, meaningful life or not. And while I was doing the meditation by Akema, I couldn't figure out what is it that I wanted to do, right? I didn't know what the purpose is. I have no idea. According to Adler, which I don't want to get into it, he said the purpose, life is usually meaningless, right? And if you read about Buddhism with Prema Chowdhuran, I can't pronounce her last name, she says there is no hope in life. You should live a hopeless life, because then you don't have fear. Because if you don't have hope, you don't have fear. And so now when I'm reading it, I'm like, okay, fine. I don't want to die, and I don't want to die with a life which I didn't live with meaning, but I don't know what is to live life with meaning, right?
Yes.
So I started getting into it. And then the reason this book kind of like talked to me is because usually when I talk to you, you tell me, Amit, you need to kind of like, and tell me if I'm wrong, you would tell me, Amit, you need to figure out you have to listen and speak, talk to or let your subconscious talk to you.
Yes.
Your subconscious tell you, what it needs to do, and you need to be open to listening to it and things like that, right? And then I create my own life. And you would also give me in bits and pieces that, Amit, don't create goals like you would in terms of, like Tim Ferriss, for example, or Derek Sievers, where they're like, I wake up at this time, I do this, I do that. And sometimes I come down a little bit very honest and direct in saying, look, if you were to make it like Tim Ferriss, you would have already done it. So now, since you haven't done it so far, you're not going to make it. But we people are very used to living in a social conditioning of, studying, going to college, doing things, getting a job, making money, getting a house, getting married, having kids, so on and so forth.
Yes.
And I think this book kind of gives me that level of information to say, okay, what do I do? So the first thing he talks about is negative visualization, right? Which kind of like got me hooked onto it, because the minute he started talking about negative visualization, he goes into, instead of desires, right? Which I would talk to you and say that, I want to make a certain level at work. I want to have a Tesla. And you would tell me that those kind of desires are not, you will finish one and then you want the next. Or when you sit with a desire, sit with it and say, okay, I made it at this role at work. Now what? Right? And he talks about it in a different way. And I want to get your view on it. What he says is, instead of desiring for things you don't have, imagine that what you have, you lost. Does it make sense? So, for example, what he's saying is, let's say I made X amount of money that are in my bank, which is making me live in a somewhat comfortable life. Imagine I lost all of that money.
Yes.
Imagine I lost the position I have at work today. Yeah. Imagine I am in a difficult situation with my, with my mental condition or my mental illness. I'm in a position where I'm bedridden. I'm unable to do things I'm able to do. Yeah. Imagine that, and then you would enjoy what you are today. So that's how he says you need to start practicing throughout the day while you're in traffic or otherwise. So that's what he says, starting with negative visualization. What's your view on that?
It sounds great. Can you do it?
So, yes. So I thought I was able to do it good. And that's what I only did that. I only did negative visualization after I read his first chapter for a good week. Right. Yes. And I started to.
In the mornings or throughout the day? In which contexts?
So I was doing it. So this one is not like you meditate on it. I was doing it throughout the day. So what I started doing was when I was drinking tea. And the funny part was when I was drinking tea, I was looking at the tea and drinking it, thinking this would be my last tea. And it was my last tea because, I was trying to go vegan after I read this book about how they mistreat cows. So when I was drinking the tea that week, when we were using real milk, I was really enjoying it because I knew it was the last tea. And when I'm eating food, I would enjoy the food thinking that, okay, what if I die tomorrow or I'm unable to eat? That is the good food. And he gives a good example in there where, which really, hit the point home, which was his mother was in a nursing care and she had some kind of paralysis or some condition, or she got a stroke, after which she couldn't swallow anything liquid because it'll go into her windpipe.
Yeah.
So while she was there, they would feed her food, which was kind of like mushed up food, right? Like they would, it wasn't like liquidy, but they would give her that food. And she was so thirsty. She wanted to have a glass of water, just a plain, simple glass of water.
Yes.
And when she told him that, hey, I just want to have a simple glass of water. I just want to like drink it from the tap water or something. And he couldn't give it to her. So, he's like, and then if you imagine, right? So every time I drink a glass of water, I think of that. And I think of the amount of pleasure you get from drinking that glass of water and how satisfying it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you worked around that. So I'm trying to mix a bunch of different things, but
I understand. So these are normal life situations, and they are aiming at appreciating nothing fancy, but actually the normal stuff that you have, the capabilities of the body, the availability of everyday life objects, and so on, right?
Mm.
Okay. So you did that for a week, and then what?
So I continue to do it. I mean, I'm not doing it all the time, but I continue to. So every time I have a desire, right? So every time I have a desire of, why am I here? Why did I switch? This doesn't make any sense. I don't see any future in here. I mean, at that time I catch myself and I'm like, wait, instead of getting upset about it, let me roll myself back and see what I have and how I'm enjoying it and how I'm lucky. So in our case, right, as you know, we wanted to live in Europe, but we had to come back to US because of my treatments.
Yeah.
And, that made us very upset for 4, 6 months, 8 months. I don't know how long I was working with you on that. But if you roll it back to the negative visualization, and you kind of helped me with that too, not in terms of, you didn't label it that, but you helped me with that, but saying, okay, I'm at a good place. I'm near the facilities, the doctors that I need to be. So, you work that out and you're like, okay, it's not bad. I mean, that's a good life.
Yes. So you basically started a bit more than a week ago. So you're still in the practice that you just described before?
I am continuing that practice. I haven't mastered it. I still fall into this thing of desire every now and then of things I don't have.
Yes.
But then I catch myself before I get too far into it.
Yes. Just a second. I'll have to close the window. All right. So, interesting case, interesting practice. I'm in a little bit of a dilemma because I don't want to destroy your practice.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because you seem to get something out of it. I think it's quite simple to see that it doesn't work.
Okay.
As intended. Because I'm lying to myself. I drink the glass of water, and yes, theoretically in the next moment something, could fall on my head and I could die, but each moment that passes proves that the probability of that is not so big. It's not that, we live in a universe where objects are flying around and I'm constantly kind of ducking. And I'm happy when I can sip my next glass of water because wow, I made it again to the next glass. We don't have this. We don't live in a war zone. So there's something fake about the premise. As nice as it sounds, right? There seems to be something that works. And I think it is connected with when you describe how you use it, which is when desire comes up. And we know from many different contexts, which don't have to agree, that whenever we are able to interrupt the automatic cycle of thought, emotion, and so on that are connected with desires, it develops a mental space, and it develops some clarity, and it develops perspective. So it seems to me that one of the ways where it works is that it gives you a tool, some tool, that allows you to put the brakes on when you are aware of certain desires that you deem problematic.
Right.
So this is how I see it. But I pretend to feel something that I don't feel. I cannot see that this is a working principle. And my guess is that at some point it will be difficult to maintain this kind of practice.
Interesting. So I don't want to jump into another point of his, but I would, right? So I'm going to go all over the place, and then at a later point we'll kind of arrange it, because arrange it properly.
Yeah. Yes.
So if that is the case, you take me into another point where he talks about self-denial, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he talks about dealing with the dark side of pleasure. So where he talks about, and I think a lot of people like Tim Ferriss, Derek Sivers, and Ryan Holiday, a couple of other guys, right? What they practice is, like, for a week, they would practice not eating. Or for a week, they would practice in staying in the same clothes and eating just beans and rice, like practicing that they lost all the money. They lost everything they had. They have no possession. They try to live on $1 a day or less than $1 a day, right? So they practice that as part of the whole Stoic philosophy of saying, practice not fatalism, but practice self-denial so you can enjoy the things that you have, right? So as you said, you're coming back to your topic of, you're drinking water, something hits your head, you die, right? You're not living in that kind of a universe. It's not very likely that, you're going to lose all your money and you're going to come down to that, level of person who's living on less than $1 a day.
Yeah.
So what do you think of that? Like, is that also too excessive, or should you not do that, or what is that?
Well, again, I come from a certain perspective, which is there is something fake about it. I can see that I can enjoy the control of it, right? I can enjoy the play. It's like, I can enjoy the BDSM thing where I tell my partners how exactly to slap me, and I have a safe word, and I have all these backups and so on. So I'm in pain, but I created pretty much the circumstances and the framework, and I'm safe in that. Mm-hmm. I know how to end it. I know how to get out of it, right? And I feel that this is somehow similar. It's not the poverty of someone who is poor and destitute with no perspective and no education. Even if you have a millionaire who built up 10 companies, gives everything away, and just walks around with one set of clothes through, the villages, you still have an individual with a super high sense of self-esteem, with excellent background in education and managing people. This kind of person will not have a big problem to build up a life again, even if they lost everything. It doesn't take much to recognize someone like that on the street as someone who is self-empowered, who has something attractive about them, and kind of paradoxically, but with kind of the self-chosen asceticism, I can even more boost my ego, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm doing something damn adventurous right here. It might look similar, but it's a completely different game as someone who never had more than a set of clothes and who is actually living on the street. So my question would be, why do I create such a fake asceticism? Which, by the way, if we go, to the historical framework that I know quite well, which is ancient India and the ascetics there, they never had it. The ascetics there, they were collecting alms food, so they're dependent on other people, but they always saw themselves as the elite. They never saw themselves as like, oh, because I'm outside of the social norm and I don't have money and so on, I'm the poorest of the poor. No, they exactly knew what it means to choose poverty. This is self-empowerment. This is not, self-denial, so to speak. And just to give one example for that, one of kind of the problems that Buddhist literature warns the monastics of is the arrogance of monasticism. To stay humble, like, monastics had to be reminded to stay humble. You don't tell that to someone who is, poor and desperate.
Why would they be asked to stay humble? Why wouldn't they be humble? Because they didn't have anything. They would go to houses and if they got food, they would eat it. If they didn't get food, they wouldn't eat it, technically. Yeah. So why did they have to be humble? Why would they not be humble?
Because they exercise such a level of restraint, self-denial, self-chosen pain sometimes, if we look to Jain ascetics, so different kind of ascetics, an exposure to danger, to the difficulties of life, that other people started to revere that because it was self-chosen. So you look down on someone who is poor because they come from a low caste or from a poor family, and you look up at someone who is poor and has chosen this out of the conviction that it will lead to not to riches, but to, liberation or to divine afterlife and so on. So people exactly knew what the difference is. To give you another contemporary example, when Westerners go to Asia and ordain as Buddhist monks, they're immediately revered by the lay population more than their local monks. Why? Because they think these are Europeans. They could have stayed there. They have everything. So they think, of course, right? It's an illusion. But for many Asians, they believe that, to live in Europe or the US is kind of the top. So if they come here into our, poor Thai jungle or whatever, and put on the robes, that must mean that they are really interested in the spiritual life. Whereas our local monks, who knows? It's just culture. They're not serious. They're trying to exploit the system and so on. So again, we have the principle of we assume that someone has self-chosen this for a higher purpose, and we immediately appreciate that. Whereas when I think that someone is just stuck in their circumstances and didn't have the power to go out of it, out of their own will, we'll look down on them because of some internalized meritology that we think, well, if that person really wanted to, they would have got out of it, so he's lazy or stupid. Why should I look up to that? I look down on that.
So that's a very interesting view that you have, but I took it in a very different way, right? Yeah. So this is how I took it. And tell me if I'm taking it or if I'm reading too much into it or making it too simple. So the way I took it was when we were in Poland, right? We decided not to have a car. And we would bike around everywhere. It was difficult a little bit, but it was also convenient. Mm-hmm. Then when we came back to US, we decided not to keep a car, right? At least for the first year or so.
Yes.
Was it difficult? Yes, it was very difficult. You had to walk, you had to bike, you had to get a rental bike. We couldn't go certain places. Groceries was getting tough, but we went through it. And then when we got the car, we really, really liked it. It wasn't like the car that we really liked. It wasn't like I wanted to go out and get a Tesla or something. But whichever car we had, the convenience of having a car and the convenience of having it right across the street was a lot of, benefit to, or we appreciated it a lot more than we had previously when we had our own garage and a car, and we really didn't appreciate it as much. So I think of it as kind of like having that trouble, and a subtle example of, and I think again, it's the same thing. Like if you don't turn on the air conditioning when it is really hot and you live that hot and humid, and then the next day you turn on the air conditioning, you're like, oh, thank God I have the ability to have an air conditioner. So I think I was looking at it from that perspective, but your perspective kind of makes absolute sense that if I were to lose my money, let's say today, I do have the knowledge and the skills that I can at least live a decent life, maybe going through a tough patch for a couple of months, but then get back on my feet after a while. So if I were to practice it that way, then it wouldn't make sense. But the way I just explained to you with the car situation, the air conditioning situation, does that make any sense? Or is that all us trying to prove something, not real?
Well, it makes sense on many levels, right? It's just, for me, it's interesting to see where it belongs. When you choose not to turn on the air conditioner, you're not in the same position as someone who doesn't have an air conditioner.
Correct.
Correct?
Yes.
Because you know that you have it.
I agree with you.
Okay. So the added value is that you appreciate that you can exercise restraint.
Okay.
Which is not for everyone, right? This is your personality. You would tell your friends, like, today, I chose not to put on the air conditioner, and they would think, that's stupid. Not their thing. And then you try to explain to them, well, it's good not to follow your desires and so on, and they just look at you weirdly.
Yes, that they do, yeah.
Right? So you get something out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And you get something out of it partly because you exercise a certain control, and the control to abstain. The control of not following your desires. Now, this has a light part and a murky part and a dark part, right? Because if you look at certain mental illnesses, they are explicitly characterized by an excess of trying to control my desires and my needs. Look at anorexia, for example, right? And anorectic, mostly women or girls, they try to control many things. There are theories that say that that the aim is actually to control their outside life, that it tries to bring control into chaotic family situations, for example, something like that. But be it as it may, I have to fight kind of this natural impulse of hunger and appetite, right? And they push it to an extreme. Plus the body dysmorphia, kind of that they imagine themselves to be fat in many cases, and so on. So the reasons are kind of course, unhealthy and dysfunctional, but it leads to an excessive use of self-control. And they feel good about that part. And it's difficult to let go. It becomes like some sort of an addiction.
That is very interesting, yeah.
Because I like the restraint. I like the control. And we get, in our culture, we get a lot of positive feedback for this stuff.
We do.
Right? So the girls who imagine you are kind of slightly anorectic or anorectic, and then the girls around you who struggle with their weight, they ask you, God, how do you do this? I wish I could be so strong. It's like, yeah, you just set yourself a goal and you follow up on it. And then, the other girls just look at you like, oh, wow, I don't know, I cannot do it. There's a lot of recognition like that. Now, I just chose anorexia as an example, but we have similar things that are not as obvious. But imagine people who kind of follow through their plans. I get up in the morning at 6 o'clock. I go on the treadmill for 1 hour. Then I go to work. After work, I go kickboxing and then my painting class. And then I go home and cook a 3-star dinner. And this is how I live my life. And other people are just like, wow.
Yeah, that's
so much control.
It is. Isn't that better? Because now you're living the life how you wanted to live it, instead of just being lazy and waking up and be like, let me watch Netflix. I mean, come on.
Good. No. So that is fine. That is, I would say that's in the middle ground. That's a little bit murky. But what I try to highlight is that how much pleasure or how much sense making there is in this, what seems to be too restrained, which seems to be too self-denying, right? I feed my ego, I feed my sense of control over life, I force my life, I force upon life my structure. Who wouldn't like that? And in comparison, it doesn't matter if I eat less pizza than the others who enjoy themselves. It doesn't matter if I don't use the air conditioner. These things that we're dealing with, like this is heavy psychological stuff, so much more satisfactory than, being lazy and enjoying oneself in front of the TV.
I didn't get that. So wait 1 second. So are you saying, so let's say and I used to do that, right? But that's where the whole conversation we had about Tim Ferriss, how he has a proper life, where he would say, okay, when you wake up, the first 30 minutes after you wake up, what do you do? So you need to have a routine in the first 30 minutes. And not everyone follows it. So when he interviews people on the podcast, not everyone has it, but he has a set routine, 30 grams of protein within 30 minutes of waking up, push-ups, doing workouts, doing kettlebell, whatever he does, right? So he has his routine. So now I try to get that routine. I wake up, I have to make sure I do yoga because that's my frog of the day, because if I don't, then I wouldn't, and I do that. Now, I did that for 2 months during this whole COVID situation.
Yes.
And I didn't quite enjoy it at the end of 2 months, right? It sounds really good theoretically. I really like it in concept again. I don't like it now that I don't have a structured routine. I don't enjoy it. But it was good. So why? But controlling, that's the control we want to have. Because if I don't control that, if I don't control my urge to date more girls or to go out and try to, be with other girls, I mean, I'll be out of control. So shouldn't you be practicing control like this? or controlling or lazy self or whatever it is?
Yes. Let's see if in the end we can actually bring it together, but we're jumping from one thing to another, which is fine by me. I would introduce here two categories of states that we can have. One that I imagine to enjoy, but I don't have yet. And the other is I enjoy while I have it. Control seems to me to fall into the category of I imagine if I had the control that this other guy is talking about, I must feel amazing.
Yes,
that's the life.
That's how I'm thinking. I imagine if, which is what I think some people will also say, I imagine I was like him.
Yes.
Right? When you look at Dwayne Johnson working out, you're like, damn, look at him working out. I just wish I was,
right.
I enjoyed working out as much.
So we're firmly in the imaginary.
But that's natural though.
Let's forget the natural for here. Yes, this is what the mind does, right? Yeah. But we're looking for something that is sustainable and satisfactory, right?
Well, that is not sustainable and satisfactory.
It might be if I give it the right place. It doesn't if I follow the fantasy of, wow, if I was that guy, I would enjoy myself a lot. And then I do it for 2 months and I see like, yeah, it's actually a mixed bag.
Which it was, because well, why was it a mixed bag? Why is it that they can do it and I can't?
Oh, well, you can, but it's not as satisfactory as you imagined.
So why is it satisfactory for them?
I don't know. Maybe they can, I don't know. Maybe they're wired like this, first of all. Maybe they exercised something like this in the past, so it's easier for them. And maybe they like to preach it. I don't know. I mean, take the classic kind of scandals of gurus and so on, who all preach restraint, and then they invariably come out with the sex scandals. These are people who like to preach restraint.
Okay. All right. So I don't want to go too much into. I do have questions, but
yes.
Let's stick with the book, right? So okay. So the other one, and I think this one, I would be surprised if you have a different view on it, right?
Okay.
So the other thing,
may I just put a little bit of a ribbon of our discussion so far? So my kind of objection would be to follow such a practice of self-denial, of self-restraint, and so on. I have to be really careful if I'm enjoying this while I'm doing it, or if I imagine that there will be a satisfying result that just never fulfills. I do it for a month and then I think like, okay, I will push through. I'm sure after 6 months, I will feel great. And after 6 months, still a mixed bag. And then I give it up or something like this. Even if I enjoy doing it, do I enjoy it because of the logic that was promised to me? Because I get access to appreciating the small things in life and I become more humble and simple? Or do I enjoy it because I'm boosting a sense of self-control and kind of narcissistically indulge in that?
Okay. I think that is a really good point. I can continue on that point because I do have a couple of questions for you. But before I digress, so just one point, and I think it would be, a lot of people may have the same question. If you don't do that, if you don't have a organized morning routine, a routine to go to work and workout routine and so on and so forth, if you don't have that and you're just living your life, you wake up and you do what you want to do and you go on about other things, do you think that kind of life is worth it? Because what are you ultimately achieving from it if you haven't set any kind of boundaries around what should be done, when it should be done? Mm-hmm. What do you do then? You just wake up and whatever you feel like doing, you do it? Is that what it is? You wake up and today you feel good, so I'm going to go for a run, but you're not scheduling a run that, you have to go for a run every day, wake up at 6. Like, how would you live then? What would you say? How should a person live?
Yes, I cannot answer this question. This is an absurdly complex question.
Okay.
Everything depends. So when you describe someone who doesn't have a fixed structure and they do what they just feel like, everything depends on where they're coming from, on who this person is. Everything. The same as everything depends on who this person is when they follow, such a stringent routine every day. Is it an anal personality that freaks out when they don't have structure anymore? Or is it someone that thoroughly enjoys it and enjoys the skill building and the morning meditation, enjoys to be in physical good shape and so on? Everything depends on that, which for me means if that is not the decisive factor, if it depends so much on the fundamental ground on which I impose a structure or a non-structure, then why shouldn't I look at that? Then I'm not interested anymore in structure versus not structure. Then my view automatically goes to, okay, who is talking there? Okay. Are they looking for a crutch? Are they desperate? Are they looking for a way out? Or is it someone who is super satisfied with their life? And someone like that would enjoy structure and they would enjoy non-structure. They enjoy what they do.
I think this one I would have to think more deeply around it, but okay, I'm still not 100% on what kind of lifestyle should we have, but okay, let's table this for now.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's a very complex question. Yes.
It's really complex because I struggle with it. Some days when I do it in a proper way, I enjoy it at the end of the week, at the end of the quarter when I make my notes.
Yes.
But then I don't enjoy it while doing it because I feel it's very much enforced on me. Like sometimes I want to read, but I have to write or I have to do some technical work. And I'm like, I really don't feel like it, but fine, I'm going to push myself to do it. So I'm doing it without enjoying it. And I'm always conflicted between that. So we'll all right.
And these two sentences that you just said, this is the human life.
It's not fun. Let me just tell you that.
And that is the human life too. Yes.
Okay. That is also not fun. But okay. So then this topic, I think you will agree to it. And if you don't, I'll be pretty surprised. But let's see.
So
he talks about the dichotomy of control, right? So, or in my philosophical mind or anything, I would call it as goal settings, right? So what he talks about is control, right? Dichotomy of control in the sense that, when we upset. So I used to come to you saying, Doc, I'm really worried about my AVM. I'm worried that there would be a bleeding in my brain and then, I'll become handicapped. I'll become incapacitated. I don't know if I'll die. I don't know what's going to happen, right? So that would give me a lot of anxiety.
Yes.
What Stoics in general say is, or what in this book he had kept it very simple is, break it into three things. What is in my control, what is kind of in my control, and what is completely out of my control, right? And you used to talk about it in a different terminology. So let's say if you arrive to that one, but what he's saying is, let's take my AVM, for example, right? It's a complex thing. Not many people know it. We don't know what's going to happen. It's all a trial and error kind of a thing going on. So it's completely out of my control. I can't do anything other than making sure I don't increase my blood pressure too much. Other than that, I can't do anything, and I don't know when it can happen or if it would happen at all, right? It's completely out of my control. Yeah. Yet I can constantly, not constantly, it's been reduced, but I used to get very anxious around it, right? Versus what is in my control is, I need to live a healthy life. I need to make sure I don't get my blood pressure high. That's in my control. So I'm controlling that. And what is kind of in my control is in this case, it is the kind of in my control is not too much, but, kind of in my control is to be around or in a place where I have the health services accessible, yes. Right? So he's breaking it like that. And then other examples are around, at work. What is out of your control is how the organization looks at you and whether they will promote you to the next level or not. That's completely out of your control. But what's in your control is to do a very good job at what you're doing. And what is kind of in your control, which is not fully in your control, but kind of in your control is to choose the right team where the opportunities like this arise, yes. Right? and just focus on in your control and kind of in your control, and what's out of your control, you have to leave it out. So that's what I got from this. And even in terms of my own goal settings, I'm setting my goals and I break them down into in my control, kind of, and out of my control.
Yes.
So what do you think of this one?
That makes a lot of sense.
Okay. I'm glad. I knew that you would kind of agree on it, but then it does make sense. But one thing for sure is you cannot, even if you know this, even if I know that my, AVM is out of my control or my promotions at work are out of my control, still, although it's logical, it's absolutely logical, but it still doesn't appeal as much to your anxiety as it should. Because I don't think anxiety is logical.
Why not? Why is your anxiety not convinced, but you are convinced?
Like, I think my brain is convinced, but there's some voice inside me which says, you need to figure it out, dude. I mean, you can't be doing the same thing after 10 years. So, you know what I mean? Like, and this is coming back to what you used to tell me at some point, saying, okay, what else can I do to make this happen? What else can I do, right? So that's what you would tell me. Okay, when I was in Poland, you would tell me, okay, what else can you do? Do you want to fly to New York and meet those people in person? You want to fly to London? Do you think that will help? Maybe that's what you want to do, because then you kind of calm your monkey or your subconscious down to say, look, I'm doing these things. Yes. I'm doing all these things. I'm doing the best I can. So you keep it low, right? So keep it calm. There's nothing else I can do. So you would continue saying the same thing then, right? So basically you then say, why is it not calm? That means I'm probably not doing something more, and it is asking me to do something more. And then you think of what else can I do, which is in my control. Is that what you were going to get to?
Yes. Now, there's a big picture to it, and there's a very big picture to it. I don't know how big I should make it. In itself, it makes sense, but it's not sufficient. Many things make sense. In order for something to work, it has to be more than that. There must be a surplus of sense-making. This works in certain cases for certain people, and it's a crutch. That's important to keep in mind. And because it's a crutch, it's not fully functional, and it might stop working at some point. The more we deal with the issues that we have, the more we deal with the solid ground on which it grows on, the more it's sustainable, and the more I can use it kind of in the long term. The more it's kind of just a crutch and a tool, that I read in a self-help book or something that is not explicitly made for me or adjusted to my needs, the sooner it will diminish its return.
I think you need to go into a few examples for that.
Yes. Okay. So the idea of to separate phenomena into these three categories, right? Controllable, somewhat controllable, not controllable, depends on a certain cultural background. If you lived a couple of 100 years prior in East Asia, they would be worried that you completely neglected the ancestors and the benevolence that you need to be granted by your ancestors in this example. It's like, you cannot do this alone. That doesn't make any sense. You have to do the ancestor rituals, and then maybe, you can do this. So there's a context to this, right? To any kind of practice that we do.
In India, they do that, right? You need to do certain things for your ancestors because apparently you carry the debt from your ancestors that you need to fulfill.
Right. And even, this is kind of common, I guess, for many religious contexts, where I can easily imagine also in an older traditional Christian or Jewish context, where someone would say, okay, I rely solely on this, on my three categories. So this is how I structure my life. And then people would say, well, this is hubris. By following this, you pretend that everything is in your hand and you have it figured out. Whereas in reality, everything depends on God. So you're fooling yourself. And just be careful that God will not punish you for this hubris. So having said that, it is located, if I don't include these kinds of forces, it already preassumes a certain cultural background. So to deal with it in isolation as we do now has the background of strong individuality, an individual pursuit of my happiness, and kind of an implicit idea that good psychological tools are available to me, and I can kind of I can choose the best ones and apply them to my life.
So I'm going to go back a little bit, right?
Yes,
to
please.
the point of, what you have to do and not, because this goes to his very next point on fatalism too, right? Where he says, and again, maybe I'm reading it in a different way, because Paul, we read it in a different way. I read it in a different way. We read the exact same chapter, two different views, where he says fate, right? He's like, your fate is already decided. And now, I looked at it in a complete different way, but Paul, we looked at it in a different way. And if you look at Adler, he says your fate is not decided. You have infinite amounts of possibilities, which is why you can't predict your future, because you can take a different turn and your future will be different. Yes. Whereas here it says that, look, if Marcus Aurelius is born as an emperor, then he should do the best job as an emperor. If Epictetus was born as a slave, then he should do his best job as a slave, right? So Paul's view was, okay, so if you're born a slave, you do a best job as a slave. So what, are you supposed to just retire into being a slave and not worry about growing out of it? And the way I read it was that, yeah, you do the best job as a slave, which includes, if you feel that being a slave or whatever is happening to you as a slave is not the right thing, then you need to fight for it. But then again, it's a question on and I don't know the answer to it, do Stoics believe in fate? Because if you believe in fate, then the point is whether I do something or I do something, not do anything, whatever is going to happen is going to happen. Makes no sense. Why should I struggle so much, right? If something's going to come to me, it's going to come to me. If it's not, it's not, right? Versus saying, okay, I don't believe in fate because it is all that I put in, I'm going to get results for that. So what's your view on this point of fatalism?
Well, there's obviously a philosophical aspect, right? And even physical aspect, and there's a psychological aspect to it. So physicists still discuss, if the universe is predetermined or if it's deterministic, right? If we had a supercomputer and we could feed it with all the variables as they are today, if it could correctly compute, it's a nonsense argument, but if it could theoretically compute the state of the next hour and the next 10 years of the universe, so to speak, that has not much to do with psychology. And people, I think, who try to make a transfer from that. So basically, Einstein had, as far as I understand, a similar worldview as a physicist, a deterministic one. Then I make a transfer into psychology, and then I assume that, okay, my life is basically set in stone. It will develop as it will develop. Now, what is wrong with that? It could be, again, it depends on the setup of the people. It will make some people lethargic. Because they're like, okay, then I can do anything, and anything that I do is the thing that I was supposed to do. It doesn't matter what I do.
Because that's what it comes back. And then it comes back to the whole karma theory, which I have started not to believe in karma because it makes absolutely no sense to me. I used to believe in it a lot. But that's the point, right? So if things are preordained, if everything is predetermined, then what am I fighting all this for? I can just chill, right?
And my perspective on this is, I look at the person that I'm talking to, and I will try to understand what is the right thing for them to believe. I'm not interested in the truth. I don't care about the truth.
So again, so what you're saying is it's all imaginary, or it's all philosophical, as we call it, because one doesn't apply to everything. It's not like a one size fit all, right? So what you're saying is, if you were to talk to, let's say if you were to talk to Palvi or me, you would tell us that, if you work hard, you'll get somewhere better. And because if, let's say I were to go to Palvi and say, look, whatever you do, it doesn't matter, fate is predetermined, she'd be like, fine, fuck it, I'm going to sleep.
Yes.
So, right?
And I talk to other people who are, hyper in the Western individualized meritology mindset. They believe that everything depends on them, which leads psychologically to an overburden of consciousness, because every small decision suddenly becomes difficult, and they feel that they have to take responsibility for every small thing. Should I get a blue car or a red car? How will people kind of differently look at me if I have this car? So it's an overburden. Our consciousness is not made for this. So to this kind of person, I would try to preach that, look, this is not your job. You have to rely on your unconscious to tell you what the right thing to do is, which is similar an argument as you have to pray and ask God and let him or her decide, what he or she tells you in those prayers, and follow that. So then my kind of strategy is to unburden the consciousness. I'm not interested in what the reality is. I'm interested in does someone has a dysfunctional set of attitudes and thoughts about the world, which leads them into tremendous suffering, and what would be the right medicine for them?
I'm really disappointed at this point because you've been playing with us all this time. Because but then, so what you're saying is there is no truth to it, is what you're saying. You're saying there is no truth. It's just like mind games.
Well, no, I'm saying is that we can talk about the truth, and then, we give each other a high five and go and have a beer. And it doesn't matter what we discussed about. It's a game, it's entertainment. To discuss about the truth like this and like in a philosophical way is entertainment, because it is not something that we have any capability of reaching and touching. There is no way for us to find out. There's no machine that can tell you, or no computer to tell you if the universe is deterministic or not.
Well, the universe is not, you keep bringing this whole point, which is stuck very well to me. And that's when I was reading this book, was around reality, right?
Yes.
Like I may create an imaginary view of how things would be. I may create a plan, and then all of a sudden I get a heart attack and everything goes sideways.
Yes.
Right? That's reality. Reality is getting a heart attack, right?
Yes.
Or in this book, they may call it fate. Is that fate? That you were supposed to get a heart attack, even though, you were doing whatever, because, your body all of a sudden decided to do whatever it had to do.
Right. Yes.
And so, yeah. And then, in India, mostly I don't know how things are now, but at least in the last 20 years or so, what they would say is, don't worry, why are you worrying so much? Whatever is going to happen is going to happen. They live with that mentality, which is very annoying to me, because you're like, at least plan a little bit, right? If you don't plan at all, then you're going to have fun. You didn't utilize it, like going on a trip,
Yes.
Not planning which historical sites you want to see.
Yes.
And then you leave that, and then people are like, oh, did you see this? Did you see that? And then you're like, crap, I should have seen this. I should have planned it better.
Yeah. Right. Yes. And I agree with that, but to come back to the point of reality, to me there is an abstract reality that that doesn't affect me, that I cannot reach, I cannot verify,
Right.
The cosmic reality. There is a very concrete reality about the mind. That is real. The effects of a certain belief system on my mind, that is real. That is not fake.
So you play with that. I'm not trying to make it bad, but you basically work with that with your clients.
Yes.
You understand what is their belief system,
yes.
And then you work with their belief system to get them to feel better. Because ultimately, it's only about them feeling better. It doesn't really matter what the right thing is.
Which is the right thing, I think. The right thing is the kind of the mindset that allows me to have a good life. And it's
true, that I agree, because they talk about tranquility. So what he talks about is not happiness. He says you need to have a tranquil mind. Okay, so if you hold your thought on that, right? So
yes.
Then goes, and there are other things that he talks about, which is anger and insult, which is also very good. But before I go into anger and insult, he talks about the meaning, right? So what he says is and they're referring to your me and everything is reliant on me and everything. So he talks about, and both between Adler and Stoic, they talk about us, me versus us, right? And what he says is the meaning or the reason for you to live is to help other human beings, right? Which means, and when I read Adler, he says to love everyone and to respect everyone. And although it sounds really good, okay, love everyone, respect everyone, that is something I cannot apply, period, right?
You neither, yes.
You neither? Okay, so I'm not the only one.
That's just idealistic.
It is idealistic, isn't it? Because how can I love someone unconditionally, someone at work who's being a dick to me? I mean, I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, that's okay. And
right. Now, I might think that ultimately, but again, what is this ultimately? I might think that ultimately it's about love. Okay. But does it break down to each and every situation? No. Maybe if eventually I live a monastic life and have discarded all worldly kind of connections, maybe I can reach something like that, but that's not relevant to me now. Today I go into the post office, and I have to wait for 1 hour, and someone pretends not to speak English, even if they do, and that fucking annoys me. So where's this great love there? Do they love me? Do I love them? No.
Are you doing the mind games, or are you being for real right now? Because I don't know now. Now I'm confused. Are you trying to tell me what I like to hear, or are you being real about it?
Obviously that is real, no?
Okay.
I mean, go ahead, live your life of ultimate love. Go ahead, go out into the world. You're now in the East Coast. Go out to the barricades and the demonstrations or whatever you have in the toxic environment and love everyone. Try.
Yeah, because no, that's what I'm saying. So what they were saying is that you need to, and again, I'm not going to get into Adler, because with him, I felt like I wanted to really have a bad argument with the philosopher, and they're Japanese, both of them. Amazingly good guys. But, they're talking nonsense, right? They were talking absolute nonsense. Love everyone, respect everyone. No, I can't love and respect everyone. If they're an idiot, and I've seen their previous behaviors, I'm not going to be able to love and respect them. Yeah. It makes sense that if I want to have a relationship with you, let's say you and I have a relationship, what it did say is that I should think of people as equal, as that I am equal to you, and there is not a vertical relationship where I look up to you, because if I look up to you, then that changes the dynamics. But again, that's Adler. In this case, in Marcus Aurelius, what I learned from the meditations of Marcus Aurelius is he hated everyone. He didn't like anyone. And he was glad that he was dying, because then he wouldn't feel very lonely, right? Because he felt very lonely, because he said there's no one equal to him. Yeah. And the funny part was, a lot of people are like, oh, I wish I knew someone like Marcus, or I knew Marcus. But, the guy who was giving a lecture, he's like, imagine if Marcus was your boss and you went to him and said, hey, I did this work. And he's like, oh, good for you, you did the work, right? I mean, if you're good at it, then that's good. You're being a virtuous man. And if you're not good at it, then, you need to become good at it. But, what are you telling me for? I mean, you're a virtuous man. That's the biggest thing to live for. Yeah. So that's tough, right? But coming back to us, so you don't believe in that. So, but then these books say that the only meaning of life is to help other humans.
I'm sorry, but this is bullshit philosophy psychology. It's bullshit. What is the...
I just thought I found the meaning of life, and now you're telling me it's bullshit.
What is the reality of that?
That's not... I thought I have to practice towards it.
Okay, go ahead, practice that.
I'm going to give love to everyone. I started with my mother to give her love.
Yes.
It kind of is working. That's working. That's working. Yeah. But I can't give love to people who are pissing me off at work.
Yes.
But then getting angry at them, which is what he talks the next point, is not going to help either. Because if I'm angry at someone at work, and then what he talks about is that pretty soon I'll be dead. That person would be dead. The entire, community we are living in is going to be dead. So how does it even matter? Why do you get angry? But so how do you relate that? So I mixed up a couple of things.
Okay. So for me, again, I will come down to something that is more tangible for me, which is the reality of the mind. For the reality of the mind, the the ultimate reality, ultimate thing, or what I ultimately have to do is not of relevance. It's not, because I have the things in front of me that I have to deal with. I don't care if I go to church on Sundays and that the priest tells me that ultimately I have to love everyone. I have to go out, I have to get into traffic, I have to deal with my coworkers, I have to deal with my family, and there this fancy idea of loving everyone is just not there. I can, yes, neurotically, I can force myself to pretend to be. That doesn't work for a long time. It doesn't. So for me, the reality of the mind is I have to deal with the things in front of me. These are the problems that I have to deal with. Now, I can use an ideal, an image, as a tool, as a crutch, right? This is the map. This is not the landscape. So someone is sitting in front of me and is confused and is like, I don't know, I hate everyone, I hate myself, and so on. And then I can talk to them about loving everyone in a functional sense, not because that this is the reality, but as a tool to clarify the mind, to give a very simple compass.
Okay, so wait, let me repeat what you just said so I understand it. Yes. Basically, what we're saying is this is a map, right? This is a guiding point, like a compass towards something.
Yes, something like that. Yes.
So it's something like that. So what you're saying is, when I'm sitting in a meeting or when I'm sitting with my family who's really pissing me off, the options that I have is to not talk to them, which doesn't usually work because that's reality, right? You have to deal with them at some point or another. Yes. The other option is when you're dealing with them to get angry. And another option is to try and practice love and compassion.
Yes, or something else. Yes. Love and compassion is a tool like many other tools. Yes.
And there are other tools too.
Yes.
But the generalization of these books saying, even Marcus Aurelius, Stoics, in saying, look, you need to live for other humans. You need to love and respect other humans, which I find it very tough to do because, most of the time I think of most people as lacking common sense, and maybe they think of me the same way too, right? I don't know. Okay, so that doesn't work very well, and you're saying it is foolish to try and adhere to that on a day-to-day basis and then feel bad about not being able to adhere to it.
I think there's a more honest way of living. I think I can do that. I think what many people actually do is every 2 months they get a new book and find a new inspiration and try something new until that wears out. And then they get another book.
That's very sad.
I think for many people, this is a reality, right?
But that's been going on for 10 years. I started with trying to find God after my dad died, 16 years ago. And I started with various different things. And now I'm ending up in Stoic, and I can tell you how many different things I've tried, which didn't stick. Yes. So when you say that, it sounds like what I have done for 16 years, and I feel very sad about it.
And so many other people.
Right.
The bestseller lists are never out of the new self-help thing.
That's like trying all kinds of diet to get into shape.
Yeah, and for some people it's necessary so that they can, that they are in okay shape. They cannot follow one diet. They have to switch in order to satisfy the curiosity and the idea of improving and the fascination of finding something new and so on. That's fine. For me, I've found peace that most people live like that. That's just, for most people, this is their life.
So to close it out, right, and I think we have gone beyond an hour. So to close it out, how would you do it? So, okay, fine, I read Stoic, and Adler, we should talk hopefully at some other time. Yeah. How do you close this out then? So, what is there? There's no meaning to life that you agree with. Do you agree with that there's no meaning to life? The only meaning is that we create our own meaning. Do you agree on that? Or you don't?
Okay, are you asking me personally or in an interactional setting?
Why don't you answer one philosophically, second personally?
Okay, philosophically, I'm here on the side of Wittgenstein, who I think clearly showed that it's mad to ask oneself these questions.
It is mad to ask oneself these questions?
Yes.
So you're trying to tell me
No, I'm telling myself. I'm not telling you. I'm telling
Okay.
myself right now. You're tapping into my thought world. This is not
Okay.
interaction.
All right. So, all right, fine. Okay. And what's the other one? What's the real, what do you think about it?
Yeah, that's what I think. That's what I think for myself.
Think about these kind of questions.
Yes. And I can talk with this meaningfully with people who are open this kind of, thought world of Wittgenstein and how he did his language philosophy. This is not something that I can easily convey to people who have not touched this before, because they live in a world where, ultimate sense and so on is a solid building block of what they deal with.
So do I need to read about him now? Because, obviously.
You don't have to. You don't have to. This is, for me, it's something that is important, right? It doesn't have to be for you.
No, because it doesn't help, right? So what I'm doing, the ultimate thing, I'm not saying ultimate, but one of the main things I'm trying to do is figure out what the hell is the meaning of life.
Yes.
And you take me into circles over the last 3 years. I'm going into different circles. Yes. I'm not able to get to it. I'm not able to get into it. So what he's talking about in Marcus is like, satisfaction, the sense of a community feeling, helping others and not expecting them to give you anything in return. And of course, now I can spend the next 5 years trying that and then be like, fuck it, it didn't work out for me. Right. Or I can try and get to a correct direction. And other people who are listening to this podcast can probably also have a similar question. So what would you say to that?
Well, again, my interest is the reality of the mind. When I look at that, you would agree that there are 50 different kind of solid proposals for what the meaning of life is.
Okay.
Now, right, the one says it's loving others, the other one says loving yourself, the other one is hedonism, whatever, materialism, whatever it is, right? Okay. Now, let's just assume that every one of those authors was not faking, but was honest. They're describing what they have found the meaning of life is.
Mm-hmm.
Because of this diversity, my conclusion is they have found what their meaning of life is. They have not found the meaning of life. This just shows, the variety shows me, that they didn't all come to the same conclusion. If they all came to the same conclusion, I would have to, again, conclude myself that, okay, this must be real then, because all wise men say the same.
That's a very good point. I like that. So everyone is coming to slightly different conclusion of what the meaning of life is.
Or very different, yes. Some differ a little bit, some a lot, yes.
So do I need to come to my own conclusion of what the meaning of life is? But that would be only before death.
The first one, I think I must agree. The second, I don't see why that is the case necessarily. If I see this diversity, it must mean that I have to find my thing, that if I just copy, what other people say, that my probability to find, because it doesn't converge to an ultimate reality of the mind, because there are so many different opinions, my probability to accidentally fall into the thing that is exactly my carved out route of life, that probability is low.
This is very disappointing. Now I have to go back and start searching again. I was hoping this book would just give me a guiding principle and then I just can continue with that. But I can see how I may be disappointed after a few years.
Okay. And here it would be interesting you're too fast. You're making conclusions where they're not necessary.
Okay.
Because my question would be, we cannot do this analysis, but if we could go and investigate all of these different biographies,
mm-hmm.
they all set out to try to find the meaning of life? Or is there a good part that stumbled upon it?
1 second. So hold on. So did they all set out to try and find, or did they stumble upon it? I can't answer that question. I think some people were finding it. Some people stumbled upon it.
So again, this shows me that if I try to pursue it, it doesn't guarantee that this is a heuristic that will make me find it.
Which didn't happen. I've been trying to pursue it for so many years.
Okay. Which can mean that you pursued it in the wrong way, or which means that you may be a type that needs to stumble upon it.
Possibly. I think I'm probably the stumbling one, and then that requires patience, which I don't have.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And I think a lot of your other listeners probably would also be going through something similar. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we're very similar in many of these respects. So basically, we opened up so many possibilities now, right? That I must be confused. Okay, what the hell am I going to do right now?
Mm-hmm.
For me, and I mean, I'm not the first in this. Obviously, there are many people who had a different, similar strain of thoughts. It means that I have to forget what I read. I have to start to observe and to learn upwards. I have to conclude, to put pieces together without the imaginary, without a presupposed end goal. Because all this is from stuff who have either stumbled upon it or worked upon it and came to different conclusions, right? So how could I pick the one that would be my ideal imaginary? I think the conclusion is I have to forget about this. And I have to look at the phenomena around me, to look at the life that I have, the life of the people around me, with fully fresh eyes.
So you're saying first you learn, then you unlearn.
Yes. First, I learn not free willingly, like I'm forced fed. I'm forced fed by parents, by society. I'm made to learn. This is not something that I set out kind of,
And then you learn to unlearn.
Yes. And then I have to learn to unlearn selectively. And then, I try to see how it goes. Does it have good effects and so on? And then to bring a little bit more complexity with the unconscious here, the unconscious is not really happy about this unlearning. So it has to see that there's something, it gets something out of it.
And then you write a book about
it. And then you preach about it, exactly. Well, hopefully not. But there are some people who try to convey this, and then other people turn this again into a philosophy. This is not a philosophy. For me, this is a heuristic. This is a natural conclusion from seeing the diversity around me and seeing the mistakes that I have done and that obviously many other people are doing. This buying a book every 2 months. If this is not an algorithm that leads to a satisfying solution, that there must be something wrong about this path.
Yeah. And I think we started our conversation saying, I found an algorithm or a set of principles to live life by, right?
Yes.
And of course, I love this book, and I found a lot of principles in here, which I'm going to keep practicing.
Yeah.
But, the ultimate goal, which I started to read this book, was for at the time of death, would I be satisfied with my life?
Yeah.
I don't think I got the answer to that. I don't think I understand or believe that helping other humans is the ultimate goal.
Mm-hmm.
I think, yes, we should, but I cannot do the love or things like that. I mean, he talks about a lot of anger and a lot of insults and how to deal with those on a day-to-day basis. I appreciate that. I think I'm going to use that.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. I think there has to be more of a search for what is more meaningful to me and me only, and then I have to live through that.
Yes. And here maybe you find a little bit more peace with my approach in my work, because this is essentially what I try to do. I try to understand who is the person in front of me, what is their path. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion. In the next weeks, we will probably do a follow-up where we will discuss the psychology of Alfred Adler and how that relates to our contemporary view on self-development.